As we begin our session today, we were talking about this notion of partnerships. And so I talked to colleagues across the state about if he's someone that's in the business sector that could really help us better understand their world and how we as educators can connect with them. And the name that kept coming up is Laura Evans. So before I introduce you to her, I want to share a little bit about her biography. She's an innovative leader and a systems thinker, and she has a passion for bringing diverse perspectives together to learn and create innovative solutions. She spent 25 years at Cerner Corporation, now Oracle Center, in a variety of leadership-focused positions. Her understanding and skills and capabilities needed for Cerner's role to guide the company's early adoption and scaling of internships and apprenticeships. And they were very strategic in developing a workforce and learning initiatives that helped to improve those opportunities. She also helped to found the Northland Center for Professional Studies and chaired the KC Rising's People Committee, where she and other education and corporate leaders supported initiatives to equip learners of all ages with essential skills and experiences. When she retired from Cerner, she joined the Kauffman Foundation as a business and education advisor to help shape and grow the KC regional commitment to real-world learning. She helped define and broker regional agreements regarding market value assets, cultivated employer awareness and buy-in, and built a small team responsible for incubating common practices and infrastructures to support the rapidly growing network of real-world learning education and business stakeholders. Throughout her career, she's been called upon for startup and re-engineering assignments because of her unique ability to see and bridge gaps between people and having that strategic, pragmatic result. And so when you hear the work that she's done in the Kansas City region, and kind of knowing firsthand how there's 40, 50 districts engaging by creating this regional ecosystem that supports learning that is meaningful to kids, I just knew we need to hear her here in Southwest Missouri. So without further ado, I want to introduce Laura Evans.
Thank you. Wow. Having your whole bio read before you speak, plus the commercial that Jan gave me is up to the pressure significantly. As has the fact that the room's full and it's probably a little warm at this point. So if you haven't removed your coat, you need to go for it. And if you need to stand up, I understand that too. I have some slides and I have an outline. And I will promise I'll try and stick to that. But what I'm very hopeful happens today is that something that I share, and I'm going to share some stories and some of the approaches that we've taken in real-world learning in the Kansas City region, but something that I think is an impetus for you if you're not already thinking about how could real-world learning fit what I'm doing and whatever role you're playing from a business perspective. By the way, thank you for the business partners who are here, educator, counselor, school leader, parent. Whatever that is, I hope that the conversation that we can have gets you thinking about something that you can do. Because I am mostly the last thing that Pam just said, which I'm sure at that point you quit listening, which is someone who is really interested in making something happen, being pretty pragmatic about it. That's good for people, good for kids, and that helps us advance a problem or an opportunity that we want to see. So I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about how I became so passionate. And if you think I feel badly, someone's advancing my slides. Okay. I'm going to bring a clicker. I don't know, John. I hope John does not remember these three young men from when he was superintendent of Liberty Schools. But this picture is from 2009, 2010 era. And a big part of my why for thinking about learning and what was happening in our schools, and particularly what was happening in the high school at the time my kids were going through high school, was them. Three, obviously, of course I'm biased, handsome, talented, young men, lots of potential, active, athletic, what have you, not motivated by school. The oldest is here, and I don't know if you can see, especially in the background, this is his Espanol t-shirt. He was probably the most motivated, and the next two less and less so. And that was really troublesome to my husband, David, and myself, before Dave was on school board. And the reason why, it wasn't so much that we expected them to love school. We finally got to the point where we're like, fine, you don't have to love school, but we want you to love learning. And learning is what should be happening when you're at school. And if for whatever reason it's not, we're gonna work on that with you, right? And the reason we cared so much about that is because both Dave and I had at one point been part of Cerner Corporation. And a couple of years after that, he left to start his own business. And we knew how important learning had been to us, had been to our ability to access opportunity, to stay relevant in the jobs we had, to get to have choices about what we would get to do next inside of that growing company. And we also saw some of our peers who felt like they'd learned what they needed to know and had kind of, set it aside. I got what I needed. I got the degree. I'm here, and got very frustrated with the pace of change and the need to continually learn in that environment. But that was reality. I was just talking to Craig, and he said his niece works at Cerner, and it was I had a fabulous career there. And it provided fabulous careers for many thousands of other people. But in order to access those careers, and even if you got there, in order to stay there, in order to grow there, you had to be a learner. And so that's why I care so much about learning. And I think how we approach it matters. The mindset we bring to it, the curiosity level we bring to it matters. So I'm pretty busy on the home front. This is, 15 years ago, trying to keep everybody between the ditches, graduating, on to the next thing. And at work, we are in 2009, 2010, coming out of the recession of 2008, but still growing. And had it been growing for the entire time I was part of that organization. And you can get a sense, we've grown 220% according to that slide, which I pulled from an old deck I had over those 11 years. And the anticipated growth was 20,000 by 2020. And in fact, it was closer to 27,000 in 2020, but we didn't know that. We were just guesstimating. And what we did know is that we needed a lot of talent. The type of talent we were looking for, I liked to describe as tech savvy problem solvers who were excited about working with clients in healthcare. We were building healthcare technology. We were supporting hospitals and healthcare. You couldn't just be a techie. You had to be able to communicate, to empathize, to understand what it was our clients were facing. And we had a lot of success recruiting off of Midwest college campuses at that point. There were lots of probably farm kids like myself who developed some problem-solving capabilities early on, who were at those campuses. We swept them up. They became part of our organization. They went on to enjoy great careers. The challenge was in 2009 and 2010, guess what was happening? Competition for talent was starting to skyrocket. We were not the only ones. That iPhone came out in 2007. Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon all had figured out what a hotbed of talent was here in the Midwest. We had robust college internship programs and relationships with colleges, but we also knew that given the growth that we were expecting, that wasn't going to be enough, and we needed to think about it differently. And we had a sense that the market was changing, and that's important because I think that's the reality I was living in. I never assumed something was going to last very long. I knew that market dynamics changed, new competitors showed up. The way you'd done something for a certain period of time probably was going to break at some point. You would have to do it differently. And so we had a sense that that was happening, and we needed to figure out how to get to talent earlier and differently. So if you'll bear with me for a second, I don't have a slide. I just want to tell you a little bit about that story. So I've got my own kids at home, watching them become less and less motivated, telling them how important it is to be a learner. And, wow, technology is a great place to be. They didn't want to hear anything I had to say. I started to do some research locally on the population demographics. And what I learned at first was refreshing. We were graduating more than 20,000 students every year from Kansas City high schools. So there was plenty of talent, potential talent in our backyard. Many of those students were going on to colleges. That was also good. It got a little murky though, when you went to try and understand how many of them were persisting, were graduating, and particularly were graduating with the kinds of skills and capabilities we were looking for. The reality was, on both sides of the state line, just over 50% of kids who graduated from high school and went on to college completed a degree in 6 years at that point. I probably should have gone and refreshed that data. I didn't. But that was that at that time, that was kind of, I was like, whoa, what do you mean? They start, they don't finish. Where are they? What are they doing? They're not in the degree areas or building the skills we needed. I was familiar with, and so were my engineering company peers. And we'd already started talking about how do we get in there? Do we need to host career nights? What do we need to do to help students understand the kinds of the opportunities that exist in our company? That problem has not changed. Still, I talk to people, employers. They're hungry for talent. Everyone is struggling to make sense of a changing world, and they want to help students see those possibilities. They just don't know how. What we decided to do at that time was knock on the door of our partner in our backyard, Washington City Schools, led at the time by Dr. Todd White. And I said, hey, let's try some stuff together. I don't know exactly what's happening. You can get this slide. But here's some of the questions I have, and I want to get better. I want to get a better handle. Where are students getting information about their career possibilities and the skills they need to access them? The early research we did started to scare me because some of the information, frankly, was incorrect or outdated. How do they decide what path to take? I wasn't having a whole lot of success influencing my own kids. I was curious, is that normal? Is that different? Some of the disconnection that they were feeling about what they were studying at school, they didn't see the why. So I started to wonder, well, how do we equip teachers to help their students understand how what they're learning is connected to what they'll do with it when they leave our school? And that was, it was not only hard to understand, it was also a kind of a hard problem to wrap my head around, because the reality is there's a lot that's happening. It's hard to stay up on it when you're in the industry. So when you're 1 or 2 degrees removed, it's even harder. And then the last question I asked was, well, what role can we play as an employer? And we felt very strongly that we needed to. So I called Dr. White. We said, let's partner. What should we do? Well, we've had a lot of success with college internships. What if we brought some high school students here on our campus, tried a high school internship program? So in 2010, we did. We piloted a high school internship during the school day. It's called Starter Scholars. I think it was 2010, might have been 2009. There were 12 students that first year. We called them our guinea pigs. We recruited them saying, we don't know exactly how this is work, but we have some ideas. And I think probably most of them said yes, but they knew it counted as school and they wouldn't necessarily have to be in the school building. It's like, cool, you could go to Cerner and go to school. Gosh, we learned so much. One of the things that we learned very quickly, when the students came in, we put them in an empty conference room. That seemed like a practical, pragmatic thing to do. And we had our managers who had identified projects that they could work on come to them. But we also knew that students needed to be in the work environment more to understand it, to experience it. So every 2 weeks, we had what we called Real Work Wednesday. And we had them go visit the teams that they were doing project work for. The semester goes along, everything's going pretty well. We had our I'm sure we had challenges, but really, largely, we were overwhelmed by how well the students adapted, by how engaged they became, what have you. At the end of the semester, though, I said, hey, you know what? We should go get some feedback. That's part of how we experiment. We We try something, we think it's roughly right and ready, we iterate on it. We know it's not going to be perfect that first time. That is definitely the way of problem solving that we were used to using. The school was like, you're going to ask them? I was like, yeah, let's stop, let's ask them. When we asked, what we heard was this from both students and managers: give us more real work Wednesday. We need more time. The students definitely wanted more time in the team. They felt like the conference room was too much like school. The managers wanted more time with the kids. And that was surprising to me. But they saw the possibilities. And they knew that they needed more time to help them understand. They also knew that they had a whole team of people who could also support them and work with them back, if you will, at their team sites. And so we flipped it and we never went back. And I would say it's kind of a game changer. And one of the lessons that we learned was it has to be authentic. If you pull it too far out, and I think this is important. I think it's important if you're thinking about client-connected projects. Kids have a great spidey sense for what feels like fake work, make work, a problem that's already been solved. And it doesn't get to the level of engagement that I think is possible with real learning. So I'm going to fast forward. Go ahead. You can to a few more examples of students' comments. In my experience over the 15 years that I've been working with students, they are hands down the best ambassadors for the impact of their experiences. Shelby was a student at Independence High School. We were talking about Independence up here. She ran one of the 3 district stores. They had 3 stores, or did have. This slide's a couple years old. And she was in charge of it in her senior year. She was part of the finance and marketing capital. It was a transformational experience for her. And she also made sure to point out to us how it was giving the students who were working in the store skills as well, which I thought was really cool and mature. Go ahead. Anthony participated in a different early real-world learning program in Kansas City. It was called a Business and Finance Institute. And it was developed through a partnership with a local finance company, that an organization called Prep KC, which was actually an education intermediary that was working with some of our districts serving our most low-income and at-risk students. And Anthony participated in that institute for a year. It ran alongside some of his regular schooling. And you can see what he says about it. Allowed me to be more successful and focused on my goals in life. Opened my eyes to what could I do. And then just one more quick story. This is Meg. She took a different path. She is currently, I looked her up on LinkedIn before I got up here, an employee at L&V Systems, which is just north of Liberty. And they are actually an international company, but the CEO, I think, is probably still Andy Haraski. I'm not sure. Was a huge early proponent of real world learning and apprenticeships, and sort of how do we build the kind of close, what we would describe as more integrated, more systemic partnerships with our high schools, so that we can really bring students in and help them see what's possible. And for Meg, that was really important, because you can see that she's telling us something we know, right? Not every kid, certainly 1 out of the 3 of mine, was not very well suited for classroom-based academic abstract learning. He thrived when he was able to get something sturdy and approach things differently, even though there's every bit as much capability in his head as in his brothers. So I love that, and I love the fact that Meg's still there. And they actually, KC Tech Academy was co-located with L&V for a while. So there's lots of different ways that real learning can happen. It does happen. And I'm obviously here to share a little bit more about the immersive experiences, because I think that's kind of the culmination, the ideal. But I will also tell you, particularly if you're working with students who are not in high school, you can't create a student to just put a student in one of those experiences after a pretty traditional path up to that point, not very much exposure, I think is difficult and if not impossible to do. I think real world learning is a mindset that we have to adopt much earlier in the education process. I think our ability to help to not just instill, but cultivate curiosity in our kids, to get them asking questions about the problems and the opportunities that they're seeing, and to help them make connections between those things and the things that we want to teach them, is kind of the holy grail of what we're trying to do. Go ahead. So why do I think it's transformative? And then I want you guys to talk about it a little bit, because I know there's varying levels of exposure. I know I was sitting with Ozark and they're doing a bunch of it. Here's what I think. I've seen these benefits. And for those of you that are trying to figure out how to work with businesses, I think there's some important ones to them. But first, I think for students, it clearly is a way for them to start to find their why, to start to identify how the things they care about, that they actually want to learn, connect to the outside world, and to begin to think about what they might want to do. What kind of problems do you want to solve? What kind of value do you think you can bring? I think another hands down win of real world learning is that students get exposure to other adults who can be mentors, peer supports, who can guide them, who can answer their questions, who can confirm, yeah, you really do have to, I know algebra 2 sucks, but if you make it through that and this, then you're ready for this next thing that I know you need to do because you want to do this kind of work. I think real world learning helps students understand that, hey, I'm capable, particularly the students who have not felt that way in an academic setting. And intentionally from the get-go, and I kind of fast forwarded without mentioning, I was part of the reason why Northland CAPS was formed in the northern part of the Kansas City area, because as we were building Cerner Scholars, Donna Dees McDaniel, who I think of as kind of co-conspirator, was down creating CAPS in Blue Valley, and we got her to come up to the Northland. And we very intentionally wanted to find students who were not the top of the list, because we knew they were getting a lot of stuff. We needed to find the students who maybe were not as motivated. We took everything, don't get me wrong. And the students at the top of the list were usually the first to apply. There's nothing wrong with that. But it was so cool to see students recognize their capabilities when you put them in these different contexts and you gave them authentic problems to go work on. And then, it goes without saying, as they build that network, as they develop skills, as they are able to tell you their why and give you their story, that opens doors for them. That gives them access to future learning opportunities, to the ability to write a better essay when they're applying to college, to go have a more effective interview when they want to go get that next job. All of those things culminate in more access for kids. What happens in the meantime? Is it just about kids? Well, for me, it wasn't. If you go back to the problem I was trying to solve at Cerner, that first year I kind of did it under the radar because I knew that I would start to get questions about it. How is this taking time from our managers? Well, how do we know these high school students? Are they getting anything done? The answer was yes. Yes, they were getting a lot done, a lot more than anyone thought they could. Will they stay? Well, we don't necessarily know, but we think some of them might. And as it turned out, fully half to 2/3 continued to work with Cerner. We built an apprenticeship program because our managers said, we don't want to lose contact with these kids. And there's a risk that they go off for 4 years and, Apple or Google gets a hold of them. How could we create a model where they can stay, they can work, they can earn, and they can learn? And we were very committed to them getting to those degrees. So we didn't take degree requirements away at that point. It's a little different now. But at that time, we were like, no, we want you to do both. You've got to be marketable outside of Cerner as well as inside. Our employees, and particularly our managers, grew from working with students. And that's what I want the business partners here to notice that. This is not just for the kids. This is for your business. You'll get some new ideas. You'll get a new lens on something that you didn't think about. And if you're really good at it, your community is going to build relationships that feed, that beget more, that create more. How are we doing on time here? Okay. will you indulge me in just a couple minutes? How many of you have seen or heard of Port Osage's coffee shop? Let me ask this. Oh, quite a few. Okay. I mean, not everyone, but I have a video. I want to just show you just a couple minutes. We'll just do 2 minutes of video, and then we're gonna do it. We're gonna take some time and let you talk to your tables. If you haven't seen Port Osage, you guys hear? Yeah.
When this coffee shop was open prior to the pandemic with the previous owners, it was really a hot spot for our community. Were able to come out here and enjoy the property. It's 5 acres. There's walking trails, there's ponds. And when it closed, there was really a need in our community for a space like this.
It came to the board as a possibility, would we be interested? And we jumped all over. I mean, actually, our board has always been pretty united, but this was one thing. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We wanted to open a coffee shop. We wanted this opportunity for our kids.
We're gearing up to open the coffee shop, so we really have a unique experience here in these first couple of months being together as a class, because we are opening a business, and that's not a lot of, a lot of students don't get to experience that. So we get to go through everything, from designing a website, social media, to what are the policies and procedures for the employees here. So we get to go through all of that together and design that, which is neat.
Whenever you talk to students, they are always talking about, it's not uncommon for students to talk about owning their own business someday. And even if they're not, even if that's the students who are in this program, even if they don't own their own business, the critical thinking, the problem solving, the collaboration that goes along with running a business is a lifelong lesson.
Well, I actually want to be a nurse when I get older, but I want to minor in business because I feel like business is just like a wide variety of things, and it helps with any job that you have, and it helps with like communications and everything, so I thought it would be a good opportunity.
We've been working on a lot of like furniture and remodeling because it was a total different feel when we first showed up, so we've had a lot of trial and error with new furniture. And we have recently gone to the roastery where we're getting our coffee provided from to like taste test and learn how things are like made and created.
Even though we're only a month in, I would recommend this to any other student, because if you're looking to be in the business industry or the entrepreneurship industry, then this is a huge advantage and opportunity for students in this area.
It's not a common thing really for like 8 kids in the morning, 8 kids in the afternoon to be like having such a big say in what goes on in a business. The most exciting thing for me, just getting ready to open it. Like, it's a lot of anticipation, waiting.
I'm gonna go ahead and stop it. It's about halfway through. You can find it on our website. I just think it's a great example. Port Osage is one of the first cohorts of districts that we started working with in the Real World Learning Initiative, which is, by the way, I left my job at Cerner Corporation at the end of 2018, joined the foundation in 2019 to start to figure out how could we make it possible for every student in our region to have these experiences before they graduate from high school. They were part of the first group. They were shot out the door. As you can see, they were doing this in the pandemic. This video is a little bit old. And I just wanted to share that because I think it does a nice job of showing that this kind of collaboration, working together to accomplish something or to solve a problem that somebody's going to have to work on anyway, but not just bringing students in, sometimes putting students in the lead and you are behind is such a great way to get them learning. So with that, let's talk about what your experience has been at your tables. 10 minutes, but you can advance it. Oh, sorry, there's more examples on the website just to show you. We have 38, maybe a few more districts in the consortium today. Lots of info. I'll give you the website at the end so you can go out and check out other examples. So where have you seen it in action? And when you think about the answer to that question at your table, I would encourage you, maybe your school isn't doing anything remotely close to real world learning, but it's happening. It's happening somewhere. Where have you seen it? Where is it happening? What are some of the benefits? Maybe what are the challenges? And then what would it take? What would it take to start to connect the work that you're doing with students to somehow connect it to authentic problems, to real world learning opportunities? Go. I know. Okay. Well, 1 minute turned into 4. But I love it that you guys are talking. And I also love it that someone opened the door. Can we need to process? All right. I have a terrible dog whistle. Also would be bad in the mic. Anyone want to share something from their conversation? Or willing to share something? An aha or a challenge? What are you guys thinking? It would be helpful to me to know where to go next. Yeah.
So, we talked about several things. We talked about measures that will happen. So in the piece here that just starting small with maybe 1 or 2 students has done well. But I'm thinking about summer school as an opportunity for different opportunities to engage in this type of.
Starting small. Really, really good. Aha. I think often we want to have it all figured out in our head. And especially at school, and this is a good thing, we want to know how we're going to do it for every student, but then we don't get it going for even a few students. And so, yes, to starting small. Another thing I think you have to think about, and these are kind of mindsets, these are kind of approaches, is who's willing, right? Who do I have a partner? Do I have someone I know who can ask this question earlier? Is there a parent who's maybe being a pain that I know has connections that we could turn into, more connections? Are there problems you're trying to solve inside your school building that you can engage students on? My husband, who John mentioned earlier, was on the Liberty School Board for 9 years. And he used to come home and he'd be like, oh my gosh. He's like, these things that we're spending so much time on, he's like, students could help with this, right? And it's true. But if you make it too big at first, it's very overwhelming and you think of a million reasons why not. So it's like, well, how do I get them started? We put kids in IT at one of our partner schools. They're better at it in some cases than a lot of the adults, those kinds of things. So great, Others. I know we have some folks who are already doing it, who are thinking about how do I expand my business partnerships. I appreciate the fact that we've got business development individuals here. Your chambers, great place. The employers of your parents, great place. And you mentioned summer, and we'll come back to that. What else? Other questions? A big barrier that you're thinking about? Yeah, or
I can offer something.
Sure.
So just to add to the thought in the room, one of the biggest barriers when we're looking at these real world kinds of experiences aren't always just trying to find business partners who have that paradigm to help with kids, but it's also to help educators to have the open mindset, because so often we operate with DESE as an example, and we see a barriers first mentality related to requirements and coding and this, that, and the other. And I know with the CAPS development, there's so much collaboration and creativity around how can we use flexible coding to make sure that students don't have barriers to their experiences, but really more opportunities. So kind of a not have a but mentality, but have an and mentality as far as how we work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, there's an obstacle. Okay. How do we satisfy if we absolutely can't move it? How do we deal with it and still go on and do what we're going to do? Early in the Kansas City work, and I'm gonna shift gears and I'm gonna talk a little bit about Kansas City's journey. I think it gets I hope it gets at some of what you're wondering about, but if you have a question, please don't hesitate to raise your hand as I start to do this. Because what you just mentioned was one of 4 lessons learned early. So I started 2009, 2010, that's when Cerner Scholars started. CAPS was starting in Blue Valley. Northland CAPS came around, I don't know, a year or 2 later. Summit Tech in Lee Summit was already doing great stuff. We had career centers who were doing great things. The gist of it was we had a lot of really small, boutique, great things happening across our region. And we have a very fragmented region. We have upwards of 48 LEAs, I think, in the 6-county region. And so we decided, we being not me, Kaufman, the Kaufman Foundation, which is where I went to work after I left Cerner, in 2017 was actually looking at some of the outcome data that I had seen in terms of post-secondary. And they were doing a lot of funding, right? But one of Mr. K's big beliefs was early programs was Project Choice. He was willing to pay for college for all of these students from Westport High School initially, and that evolved into Casey Scholars. And so the foundation has poured a ton of money into helping remove funding as a barrier for students to go to post-secondary. But they were troubled because the completion rates were low, and really wanted to understand, well, of the kids that are getting through successfully transitioning after high school on to the next thing, what do we know about that? Is there something common? And one of the things that we identified is they had often had access to these kinds of opportunities, real world learning opportunities, meaningful career exposure, those kinds of things. And so they said, hey, we're interested. They brought Donna Dietz McDaniel in. She did a landscape analysis, and that revealed lots of things happening, but boutique and siloed. There's 4 lessons. The second one, or one of them, was that neither Department of Education, Kansas or Missouri, was holding it back. There were ways to go do this for more students. Are they the easy button? No. Third was businesses were engaged. They were excited, but they said, hey, you got to make it a little easier. And if you can think about it from my perspective, I was an organization that was interested, frankly, in talent sitting in all those school districts, but with that many boutique programs, there weren't enough hours in the day to even go understand what I needed to do to connect. So that's why programs, consortium approaches became so valuable. They simplified that easy button. We got there more quickly. And so the foundation said, hey, let's invest. But before we do that, let's get really clear on what we're investing in. And so I was at Cerner, and they called me and they said, Donna called me and said, hey, will you lead a small group, cross-sector leaders in Kansas City, in kind of a design thinking exercise? If we're pretty confident that diplomas as they are today are not enough, they're not, kids are leaving without all the things they need. The question was, what do kids need to be successful in life learning and work beyond high school? And if you want to advance my slide, that small group ended up being 40 people, which I still laugh about, because I was like, 40 people is not small. Sorry, one more. Donna's like, they won't show up. Don't worry. They did. Oh my gosh. Go ahead and advance. I think this must go. We met for 4 months. Pretty much every single person showed up at every month meeting, and there was homework in between, and they did it. And what that told me is that answering this question, what our high school graduates need to leave with to be ready for the future, it was really important to people. It was important to education leaders. It was important to business leaders. It was important to parents. It was important to civic leaders. It was important to, we had faith leaders, all represented in that 40. So this is a not too pretty portrait of a graduate that ended up being the output of that 4-month exercise. And I think, I don't know how many of you all have gone through a portrait of a graduate exercise. Some of you? I'm going to bet that some of the words you have might be different, but they probably essentially mean the same things as what our portrait did. We came up with this. We felt good about it. We felt overwhelmed by it as a group. And we also knew that as a region, we couldn't necessarily implement this. So this was a thinking exercise that was a way for us to work together, to learn together, to get to a level of shared understanding. And frankly, it helped us build deeper relationships across those different domains so that I better understood the world of an education superintendent or a building leader or a civic person. Did this exercise beginning of 2018, did the presentation of it in April of that year, said, phew, went back to my job at Cerner, didn't think about it. Meanwhile, at the Kauffman Foundation, they were thinking about it. Aaron North, the VP, was committed to helping support funding, to figure out a funding mechanism to help schools who want to do real learning for every kid. And so what we decided ultimately is that we needed to take this and focus on a gap area that we felt we could, and that was real world experiences. If you'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So we decided to focus on experiences, and we decided we needed a common goal. We needed something that everyone that had participated in all those early adopters and those practitioners across the region who kind of knew the benefits of what we were trying to do would get behind. And that was this, that by 2030, and this was prior to 2020, all of our high school students in our region, 6 counties, would graduate with one or more of what we called market value assets and a diploma. So it was back to that email. You know, we had some pretty fun conversations about why don't we just, let's tackle the diploma, blah, blah, blah. And everybody was like, no, diploma is going to happen. We're talking about what needs to happen beyond it. And so this was our goal. And then if you'll advance, the market value assets was the tricky part, right? Now we had to go and decide, okay, well, what experiences do we think or do we know from data are most impactful for our students? And so a small group of us got in a room a few times over the course of a couple months. I was one of them, Donna was one of them. We had a civic person, we had an educator, an education intermediary, and we said, let's just take the best of our experience, the best of the data, let's dig through and let's throw our best shot out there. And we'll call them market value assets. And the reason why, and there's a love-hate relationship with that term to this day. Some school districts didn't even use it initially, but I think everybody is now, which is kind of funny. Is because these were things that helped students be transitioned to the market. And we defined the market broadly. You know, it could be work, but it could also be higher ed, right? These were assets they could take that were worth something in the eyes of the individuals that they were trying to access opportunities from next. So they were work experiences, and we defined those as internships or client-connected projects. Industry recognized credentials, which you all are real familiar with, which we could go into a rabbit hole about too, because I think that the IRCs, not all of them, were recognized as valuable at that time by employers, and I think that continues to be a challenge, but I still think they're valuable because they're hands-on. College credit. Those who were working with first-gen students were very adamant that if they could get 9 or more hours, 6 hours was a data point that worked. But we decided to set it at 9 under their belt. That made a meaningful difference. If you go back to some of those transformative factors for students, it meant they believed they could at that point. They had been exposed to different adults through the acquisition of that credit. It satisfied some of those things. So the 4th category got added just a little bit later, and that was partly because of the Kauffman Foundation. If you're familiar with the Kauffman Foundation, Mr. King focus areas that he felt were so instrumental to his success in life or education and his entrepreneurship endeavors. And so that has been the foundation's focus. And we felt like it was important to call out entrepreneurial experiences, and I was 100% behind it as a business leader. And here's why. That mindset is part of what you need in any business. The ability to seek out opportunities, to be curious, to try things, to iterate, to fail, to pick yourself back up, try again. That entrepreneurial mindset, whether you ever go on to start a business or not, makes you a better employee if you decide to work for someone else. And oh, by the way, we've seen some of the greatest energy in kids around this particular category of market value assets. So these are our 4. And this basically formed the common language that we organized ourselves around. This plus our goal. And I would say the keys to getting started were agreeing to collaborate, agreeing to work together, identifying that common goal that we're working toward, that North Star, and then being very specific about, what does that mean from a quality perspective? There are definitions that go with each of these that you can go onto the website and access. And that part was, I will also say, very important to me as a business leader, because too often I've seen people that would say, oh, I've got an internship program, and it didn't feel like that to me. For example, in our own college internships, everybody had real work. That was something we were very committed to as a company and organization. This is not a job shadow. There's not a glorified summer camp. You are here to be part of a team, to contribute. And we took that attitude toward our internships for high schoolers as well. And they become pretty vocal advocates of that also when they go to other places and they don't encounter that. So those definitions are important. And that forms, if you will, the tight part of our real world learning initiative. We're going to get every kid at least one market value asset before they graduate. And here's how we're going to define this. It is then up to districts, 1, to opt in. You don't have to do that, but if you want to, you can. There's just a few things that you have to do. 1, you have to have your board and your school lead or your district leader committed. It needs to be part of your strategic plan. 2, you have to, and this wasn't a hard have to, but we tried to help people understand, and I think they did. We want you to share your progress with us so that we can roll that up and share that with everyone who's committed to helping us achieve this goal. So data sharing is a part of what we do as a consortium. We do it through a third party. We make sure it's all FERPA and IRB compliant. But we do want to understand what's happening with those students and as much data as we can, because it then helps us understand what's working and what's not. We can make adjustments down the road. We want data in the form of feedback from employer partners, from teachers, from all of our stakeholders, from parents, from students. So data is a big part of the regional effort as well. Let me stop there. Questions about market value assets?
Laura, can I add one piece?
Yeah.
I love the client connected projects, and it's something that happens in the classroom, and I just want to plant that seed because probably in our region, that's not on a lot of our radar, but it's not just a partnership with a business. What makes it very unique is that they are a part of the feedback process. Like, it's not just a teacher doing a project for a business, they're actually engaged in the work and providing that feedback around it. And that's kind of a new piece, and it's easier to maybe engage in than some of the other experiences that you talked about. So why don't you add a bit more clarification on that one?
Sure. Client connected projects. If you're in a CAPS environment, you're probably working using client connected projects. We debated on what to call this because there's a lot of great problem-based learning that can happen in the classroom. Project Lead the Way has a huge footprint in Kansas City. My kids all loved those were the few things they loved, Project Lead the Way classes. The difference in Client Connected is that sponsoring organization, that client, they stay engaged. They don't just throw you the problem statement. They're there to help students to answer their questions when they need to clarify that. They're there listening to their pitch of how they think they want to tackle it. And why is that important? Well, let me go back to 2009. Our group of 12 that was in the conference room that got a project from us in that very first semester. I'll never forget their presentation. The students were there. They were ready to present the problem. And I was part of the sponsoring team, we're really interested to see what they were going to say because we hadn't heard much from them. And they came in and they gave us their solution and they thought they nailed it. And about 3 questions in, because it was like, well, that's an interesting solution. It happened to be something we knew had been tried in a couple places and hadn't worked very soon. Tell us more about how you decided on that. Tell us about what you researched for that. 3 questions in, it started, I think, what has started to happen is the kids were like, oh, it was a completely different level. Now, I'm not saying that you as educators aren't doing that. What I am saying is that when a business person says that, suddenly they're like, oh, and at the end of the year, when I had one of the kids in that first group call, I was like, hey, tell me something that you learned the most from over the past year. We tried a lot of things, but oh my gosh, that first presentation, the 7s, that sucked. We knew, we thought we were, he didn't say this way, he's neat, right? We thought we had it, and we quickly realized, no, and there's probably things that we didn't know we needed to know. And he said, and that completely changed. I realized I didn't really know what you were expecting or how to go about solving it. So I think that's my personal for why the client connection is so important. I will also say I've worked with a lot of managers and hundreds of students, and sometimes we have to remind our managers, yes, they're students, but they still need hard feedback. They need it now more than ever, because if you give it to them now, it's safe. This is school. They learn. They have a chance to understand, and then the first time they get that feedback is not when they're our employee and their job is on the line, because we saw plenty of that, right? We saw plenty of graduates who thought they had all the right answers, and the first time they found out, no, you actually didn't dig deep enough was, when they were in our environment, and that's no fun. We didn't fire them, but we helped them understand, nope, that's not what far is. So client connected projects are achievable. We'll talk. I'm going to talk just a little bit more about it. This is important. Those market value assets, and you've sort of alluded to this, but I'm going to reinforce it. You can't wait till a student's a junior or senior and then just throw them into these. They are real world learning. I said this earlier, and I want to just reinforce it. It is a progression of learning, of working together, of exposing, engaging, exploring, and immerse is the words we've used. You got to get students engaged. This happens early, right? This happens really early. What does it even mean to be in the field of healthcare technology? How do we help them understand what that is, what it looks like, so they have a sense of, oh, that's something. They start to explore. Projects can be a market value asset, but they can also just be a place where you explore. I'm going to dip my toe in. I'm going to learn something. Immersion, which is where most of the market value assets are, is when you're really in the you're doing the work, and the work is providing learning, and you're working alongside a team. And that internship apprenticeship, is kind of the holy grail, if you will. And so powerful for students. It's so powerful that now, colleges, many of them are starting to require it. They're looking hard at internships as an entry, differentiator when we're looking at applicants. I mean, it's pretty crazy how much more focus we have now on this as a needed part of your experience that prepares you for what happens after graduation. Go ahead. So I mentioned we have a website. It's called realworldlearning.org. There's a whole bunch of stuff on it. I believe that there was a case study that you all received in pre-read. You can access that case study, or you can just actually, if you're an explorer with AI, if you're using Microsoft Copilot, You can type in real world learning and it's pretty amazing what it brings back to you. And a lot of what it brings back to you, you do real world learning Kansas City is part of that case study. Getting Smart is the organization that worked with our team. They were instrumental from the beginning. In 2018, before I came to Kaufman, I went on a learning trip with Tom Vander Ark and several of my business peers and superintendents and intermediaries. We went to Ohio. We saw some amazing things, different types of schools, what they were doing there. So there's ideas like that on our website. There's resources like this. We have Client Connected Project. Now we have professional development strands going, so you can check out some of that. You can check out the market value asset definitions, and you can also watch some videos. You can see some videos of different school districts and how they've decided to implement market value assets for their students. And before I give it back to him, I just want to reiterate that piece because I think it's super important. The only piece that we said we were going to hold tight is the loose tight model. The tight part are the market value assets, the shared goal, and our shared commitment to ensure our experiences get to that level of quality. And they were defined by not just by a school, not just by me, not just by a civic person, by all of us sitting down together, right? How schools decide to help students access those, totally up to them. So that allowed our districts, and I think that really created an environment where districts felt empowered to do some self-inspection, to say, well, what is it that I'm already doing that's either meeting that quality bar or could be meeting it? Like, for example, I've got some great project-based learning, and I know there's companies doing that. How could I go recruit some professionals to come help me beef that up? And it's voila, it's Client Connected Project, right? What are we doing in the IRC space? We really encourage schools to self-inspect, look at where you were producing them, what was near could be, and then what do you want to dream about? And then we the foundation provided some time and space and a little bit of funding for them to go explore. Early on, that was out and about. Now there's lots you could see in Kansas City. I mean, a lot of different approaches are being used to expose kids to these kinds of experiences at high school and earlier. And so I just want to reinforce that. My guess is there's places where this is happening. How do you lift that up? How do you look at that? How do you think about making more of that happen in a not too overwhelming way? And then I think too, it's important the process we went through to create that shared vision, that portrait of a graduate process, whether it's that or it's just conversations. I can't stress enough how important it is to get people in the same room and ask the question, what do we think our kids need to be future ready? What are we excited that we're giving them today? And what is it that we think is missing? And what could we do to close that gap? That's where we started. And it's pretty amazing, honestly, where it's come to this one.
Thank you, Laura. And so why we thought she would be so powerful to speak to us is because of this regional dynamic they created in Kansas City, because of 8 or 10 thought leaders in that region thinking about what kids need more of around this real world learning experience opportunity. And so before we exit today, I really need you to think about that. Here in Southwest Missouri, we would love to see our children, all of our students, have similar opportunities. Now, we've got pockets of it. We have lots of boutique programs, great programs already happening. But how can we be more centralized? How can we be more intentional in making sure all of our kids have these kinds of opportunities? So at your tables, kind of frame it a couple of ways, like what can you do more of in your buildings and districts? But just as importantly, what can we do more of as a region? And GoCSD is ready to help lead the way, but we kind of need some guidance from our members. What does that look like? if those CSD took some efforts to like carry the torch to reach out and build this kind of an ecosystem. So 2 questions at your table. What do you need to do more of at the district level? And what do we collectively need to do more of at the regional level to ensure all of our kids have opportunities with real world? We'll take about 5 minutes, 2 minutes on each question. Okay, let's get back together. Anybody got a really great idea that you talked about at your table? A lot of you kind of stayed in that district realm, like what else can we do as a district? Anything out there that we need to share with the group, some ideas that you're percolating and thinking about? Or regionally, what else can we do as a region to explore these opportunities? Be more conservative. We've got our WID director in the back. Thank you for being here. Great program that connects. We've got our GOCAP director here. We also had Betty Glasgow with apprenticeships here. So we've got great programs in our region. But how do we build on those and be more intentional and start more like at that immersive level, like, or I should say at the awareness level? How do we get KA kids more excited and more engaged and more connected? And how do we get the teachers excited to embrace some of those client connected projects? What do we do as a region to look that up? Anybody?
Well, I can't speak to the regional piece, but I'm college and family counselor, so I have some conversations about things. And there's so much, at least for me, like I want to do this, I want to do this, like physical therapist, I'm going to talk on being an athletic trainer, and I'm like, okay, do you like science food? Well, oh God, no, I get that. Okay, you don't really like people. You told me that. Yeah, I'm not a people person, but I want to be a physical therapist. So then I start looking like, okay, this is what you need to do with this degree and for years. And I'm like, hey, you know, that is a package deal. So that's what you have to do. But it's so many things sound good until you actually know more nitty-gritty about it. So for us, it's shadowing, I think, is kind of where we're like early. because it's different when you see it, and we just set up a meeting, I'm super excited about it, might be able to go, but we're taking our anatomy students to the cadaver lab at MSU. Okay, so I go to class here, and we were telling them yesterday, and you can see them are you're excited, and then there's people that are like, I'm not sure, and they were choosing, they're gonna grow up. You know, that, to me, that's kind of a make or break, because it's different when you see that. I mean, it's one thing to read about it and you go see it, it's like, maybe not, or I'm all about it. That's great. Well, I figured out how this works. That's what's kind of advice. And I have really good luck with HR directors. If I have a question, it asks if I'm like, yeah, let's call somebody. And they'll help me out. You know, what do I need to do with that? Do I send them to that school? Maybe, and we're sending to this apprenticeship. I'm like, okay, great. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we talk about.
And I love that you have that counselor perspective, because we can't do this work without that mindset and that lens. And I love that you also have a career piece connected to that, because that is a key piece. We need our counselors engaged. What about our Springfield CTE director? I hate to put you on the spot. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway for you? Some connections with the work you're doing in Springfield.
At our table, we talked a lot about not just capitalizing on partners in the area, but just with your own system. So obviously Grow Your Own is rising in popularity. At Waynesville in their auto program, they do an internship in their bus barn and learn that way. We're about to open a credit union in one of our high schools, so our students have a space within the building where they can work during the day. So we have that high level stuff. But I think you talk about partnering with someone on projects, embedding that just in your typical, not just CTE classrooms, but any can be super beneficial. And it can be something that's on repeat, so something written into curriculum, and then a little bit of a change up each year, so it looks different for each class of students. Our ag students recently worked with Missouri Conservation Department to put a plan together for redoing their flower beds at one of their locations. So learning about native plants, learning about soil and what would work there. And then they go through progressions of presenting that to those experts and getting feedback and then improving their work. And so I think that can be embedded into any classroom. So you've got the smaller things that are still valuable, and then the large scale, like a credit union. So
exactly. I love the way you brought it to the teacher level. Ed programs, CTE programs like that are great places to start. We're doing a lot of that work already. But also the way that the school was the client, right? So you all have problems. You all, like, one of the ideas that we heard about was that a group of students were designing the playground. You like, what they want that playground to be like. But there's human problems, and those kids have a great problem-solving way of thinking about things. So think about yourself as the client sometimes, as the school leader, and getting kids to be engaged in problem solving. And I promise you, you can connect to those learning standards. Like, we're not talking about isolated teaching and learning over here. We have to connect it to the learning standards and being intentional in creating learning experiences with those learning standards connected to it. Why not? And making sure that kids are getting credit for these experiences as well. And that's a whole nother topic. We can think about vetting credit with some of these experiences. There's just so many places we can go with this. But we have to have that entrepreneur mindset ourselves as educators. We got to think out of our current box about how we can do this one. Yeah.
I would just say, if you have the opportunity to send teachers on externships and immerse them in the business world, that is a fantastic idea to build those relationships with those business partners, as well as get the project ideas and bring those back to the classroom and have meaning for the students. We've had several projects that have been born out of that. We've had several years ago when they did the Highway 65 expansion of 3 lanes. We had an English class that worked with MoDOT to develop the messaging for all of that, the press releases, the radio announcements, the messages on the board, what have you. And so we've had other organizations that students can develop websites for, a lot of nonprofits. They're kind of fertile ground for that, since they don't have funding to be able to do that themselves. So getting those teachers out, getting them connected to industry that way, and having a greater understanding of the skills that their students need to be successful in the workforce, because they continually hear from them that those kids are lacking whether they're coming out of high school or college.
Thank you for that. Excellent point. We got to get teachers out in the business environment and see what that work looks like. Thanks for that.
have a little comment on chat, if I can share that. So it says, I'd love to see a regional effort similar to Teacher Conference Days to spread awareness about real world learning. Perhaps celebrating the win-win relationship between schools, students, and partners. Maybe little video vignettes that share personal stories about how a student's future has been impacted by their involvement in real world learning, the connection to a local partner, and how the local partner did it.
I love that. Thanks, Debbie. And thanks for the person that shared that idea. So we're all in this together. We're a network. GoCSD is helping to lead this way, and we want your feedback and your ideas. So let's keep the conversation going. Is that a plan? All right, one thing I want to just put up here to remind you of, we mentioned this earlier about the need for a common understanding with business and industry, community stakeholders, and schools about the dispositions and skills we want kids to have when they graduate. Like, we've got our learning standards, but as we're designing lessons around like those dispositions that we need a course of a graduate to make that happen. So this is a really key piece of the work we're talking about with real world learning. It gets at those dispositions. And so I encourage you to think about engaging, if you don't have one, a portrait of a graduate. And so, of course, GoCSD saw that need, and we're offering training of that. So we don't come in and lead the conversations, but we train you in how to lead the conversations with your community to develop a portrait of a graduate. And it's actually the training's done by I4PL, Institute for Personalized Learning, the Kettle Moraine School District, who's like kind of one of the leading edge districts as far as competency-based learning. They do the training around this, and so it's really powerful. So I encourage you to do that. But if you're still going, what is this portrait of a graduate thing? We have a 30-minute info explanation session around what it is and why you need it. So just wanted to plug that. You guys have been so gracious today. Laura, again, fantastic.